So, now I've finally had the chance to see Nocturnal Animals, I can officially make my top 20 films of 2016 list. 2016 was a very divisive year for film, not just for me, but for a lot of people. Obviously, you had films like Batman vs Superman, Suicide Squad, X-Men Apocalypse, even Rogue One was quite divisive. So, it's been a very mixed bag for film, but I think we've got definitely some quite good, if not great, films that were released this year. Not all of them necessarily were the blockbusters, but they were the ones that were the most talked about this year. And ultimately, I felt that a lot of blockbusters this year fell quite flat. So you will notice a fair absence of blockbuster films in this list. There are a few exceptions, but there's not really a massive amount of blockbusters. A lot of them are more independent films, or even just films that may have made a lot at the box office, but they weren't advertised as big summer popcorn adventures. So before I start this list, there are a few things to keep in mind. The first being that this is my list. This isn't an audience poll or anything, so don't get confused and think that this is so many other people's opinions. This is solely based on my opinion, if I thought the movie was good or not, and if I actually enjoyed the movie. So it's not necessarily even a list of the top 20 best made films of 2016. This is a list of the top 20 films that I enjoyed the most and that I liked the most in 2016. And if you do want to check out my whole list of every film I watched in 2016 ranked, I have that on Letterboxd. I'll put a link down below. I have it on the screen right here, so if I keep looking that way, that's why. And first of all, let's get started with the runners up. So these are just the honourable mentions that I really didn't want to leave out. So these are number 25 through to 21. So 25, we have The Girl on a Train. This was quite a critically panned film. Not many people enjoyed it, but I couldn't get over the film. The first time I saw it, I really loved it. I loved the book, which is probably why I like the film so much, even though they did change a fair bit. I thought Emily Blunt's portrayal was just, like always, excellent. Emily Blunt's a very talented actress. I think she's quite an underrated actress. She deserves a lot more box office receipts than she actually gets, unfortunately. Number 24 was My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2. I know, some of you might not even know that this came out, some of you might not have even seen the first one, some of you might have hated both of them, but as someone from a Greek family myself, I just really related to this film. I found it really fun, really enjoyable, but the reason it didn't make my top 20 is because when I was comparing it to other films, because it was in my top 15 list for quite a while this year, because it was released earlier in the year. When I was making the list and having to compare them and rank them, it just didn't seem to make the cut. I just didn't feel right putting it in amongst the other films, which I thought were considerably better than this. Number 23 is Moonlight. I got the chance to see Moonlight. I was so happy. It was at a special screen, and oh my god, it blew me away. It really is as good as people are saying. It's not overhyped, at least in my opinion. I honestly implore you to go see it. Please go see it, support it. If you see it coming out anywhere near you, please go and see it. Even if you don't like it, if we start supporting these independent films such as Moonlight and a few of the ones on my actual top 20 list, we can really start to perhaps get a mix again of independent films versus blockbusters. 22 is Bad Mums. This was on my top 10 movies of the year so far, back in August, but yes, again, like My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2, adding up the top 20, it just didn't seem to fit in, but I couldn't leave it out. This is kind of the main reason I wanted to do the honourable mentions, so that I could mention this film, because I really liked it. I thought it was great. I can't wait for Bad Mums 2, coming out this year in December. It's going to be a bit of a battle though between Bad Mums 2 and Pitch Perfect 3, right? But hopefully both of them will have a pretty decent box office run. Bad Mums definitely had a decent box office run. It didn't flop. It made, I think it was about twice its budget. I haven't got the exact statistics here. But it did quite well. And Pitch Perfect is obviously quite a big franchise. It's got a lot of big names attached to it, such as Anna Kendrick, Rebel Wilson. A lot of people didn't like Pitch Perfect 2, so that might affect the third installment. I didn't mind Pitch Perfect 2. I didn't hate it as much as a lot of other people did, but it definitely was not as good as the first one. And I do kind of partially blame that on Elizabeth Banks. This was her, I think it was her directorial debut, and it just fell ultimately flat. You could kind of tell it was the first time she had directed one of these movies, especially a comedy. It's quite a difficult field to direct, even if you're a comedian, as we find out often when we get comedies released, such as War on Everyone, which was supposed to be a dark comedy, turned out to be awful, and that's going to be in my worst films of the year. I think it was my third worst of the year. I actually walked out, and I've never walked out of a film before until then. That's how bad it was. I paid money for this, and I was like, no thank you. Number 21 is the Netflix film Hush. You might have actually seen this pop up on a few YouTubers, or even just general critics, end of year films, although I don't think a lot of actual writing critics, as the ones you find in newspapers, once you release things like that, those format reviews, will have really paid attention to Hush, because it is a Netflix original film and it didn't really have a lot of hype or promotion to it like a lot of Netflix films, and you know, they're normally kind of battered into your brain with YouTube ads, but here we didn't really get that. So that's my 25 through to 21 done. Obviously, if you want to see what the rest of the films are, how they ranked, I will put a link to the Letterboxd list, but that's kind of all the films I felt were passable, or just really good this year. The films after that were either passable, bad, or god-awful. So now we're on to number 20, and number 20 kicks off with Nerve. Nerve was one of the biggest surprises of the year for me. I didn't even see the trailer. I didn't really have any idea what it was about, and the only reason I went and saw the movie was because I saw one of my favourite YouTubers, Jeremy Jahns, do a review of it. He gave quite a positive review. Then Chris Stuckman gave it quite a positive review. So I just thought, you know what, I'll just go see it. I had nothing better to do that day. And it was a really nice surprise. It wasn't a great film. It certainly had its flaws, particularly towards the third and final act. But a lot of it comes down to Emma Roberts and Dave Franco. They kind of have to carry the film along, and I think they've managed to do that quite well. There's not really a time any of their acting feels bad. The only acting I really didn't like in this movie was, I don't know what her name is, but Emma Roberts' mum. I thought she was really aggravating, really over-dramatised, overacted, and I didn't like her. I thought she was a very cliched character, and I also want to know why her mum has a connection to V's bank account. There's a lot of weird things. I think they just wanted to include the mum some more, but so they were like, let's connect their bank accounts, and it's like, why? Who has their mum connected to their bank account? I don't know, maybe people do. I don't know anyone else who does, but it's in America, I'm in the UK. Number 19 is Sausage Party. I mentioned this in my August end of year list. I really liked Sausage Party. It wasn't great, again, which is why it's not in the top 10. It was in August, but that's because I hadn't really gone through every film of the year. I rewatched every single film on this list before creating this list and before ranking them officially before 2016. And Sausage Party, I found rewatching it, I found myself slightly bored towards the middle. It was funny and it kept me kind of entertained, but in terms of compared to the first time I watched it in theatres to renting it and watching it, I really didn't feel like it had the rewatchability factor it should have had. It was funny. In fact, I noticed more jokes, and I like the message of the film. Really, it's kind of like, you know, get your head out your asses. Not everyone's always right. And then obviously it goes into a bit of weird territory with, you know, food orgies, but it's all in good fun. It's a decent movie. It was fine. I expected more. I kind of expected it to be more offensive than it was. That sounds dumb, especially considering 2016 was the triggering year of snowflakes. But I when I when I saw the adverts for this trailer, for this film, when I went to the film, I was expecting not just raunchy comedy, but quite offensive comedy, quite comedy that would probably anger a lot of people. I'm one of the people who loves black comedy. That's what it's called, or dark humor. And I thought this didn't pull it off really, pun intended. Or should I say no bun intended? I'm sorry. But overall, Sausage Party was a bit of a disappointment. Number 18 is Don't Breathe. Oh, I loved this movie. I loved it watching it. I left, and I actually started to feel quite disappointed. But it was a good film for watching. When you're watching it, it feels fresh. It feels like a whole new kind of level for horror movies. But then, when you're not watching it and you're actually thinking about it and how much it was hyped and how much people were loving it, you're kind of like, really? Don't get me wrong, it's a very well made film. It's a well acted film. There's not a single bad performance in the film. It will definitely satisfy kind of horror junkies who want more bloody torture porn in a way, because there's been kind of an absence of that actually in horror. It's a lot about supernatural and found footage, and those movies don't normally have the budget to do torture porn. But there's also a decent amount of tension. There's a decent amount of thriller elements which will please the horror fans like me who prefer kind of slow burn thrillers, or just ones that aren't just blood everywhere. And also Jane Levy gave an amazing performance. She gave an amazing one in Evil Dead 2013, I think it was, when the remake was made. And she does it again here. She's a very talented actress. I think she should start getting a lot more roles, and hopefully studios start paying more attention to her, because Don't Breathe did quite well. It was quite well received as well. So hopefully she starts getting more jobs, more roles in more mainstream films. Or maybe she's happy with indie films. She seems to be having quite a good time filming indie films. She doesn't seem angry or anything. So perhaps she likes it. There are actors who prefer to stick to indie films, such as some, which I will actually point out later on, some actors who have gone from doing blockbusters to indie films because it's less pressure in a way. But anyway, number 17 is King Cobra. King Cobra was a film I was really anticipating since last year. I love James Franco. I think he's an amazing director in this movie. I think he directed it. I'm not sure. But also, he's a great actor. He's one of my favourites. Sure, he's given a few odd performances, right? I mean, we've all seen, well, I think a lot of us have seen Spring Breakers. That wasn't exactly the most comfortable performance to watch, but there's a sort of craft to him that I think we still need to kind of figure out, because there's a certain way he likes to act. He really gets involved in his characters, but then the payoff is never quite enough. But in this film, I thought he gave a fairly decent performance. Keegan Allen, I'll say he didn't give the best performance. I was quite disappointed with him, and apparently so were the film crew. Of course, there were a lot of there were a few news headlines saying that Keegan Allen had been quite a pain on the set. He was quite awkward to film during the gay sex scenes. Now, King Cobra is a movie about a gay porn star who becomes quite popular, and everything goes to like shit really. But I think there's no way none of these actors knew what they were getting into when they did this movie, right? I mean, you don't read a film synopsis that has the word porn star in it and is about a real life porn star and think, oh, I'll be fine with this, you know, there's no nudity going to be involved in that, there's nothing weird to do. Like, so I don't really know why Keegan Allen would have taken this job, if, pun intended. I don't know why Keegan Allen would have done this role if he wasn't comfortable with it. So perhaps it was just an offhand comment being taken out of context, as often happens in the media, particularly with film. But overall, King Cobra was fun. It was sexy in a good way, you know, it wasn't like a hornball show, which I think is what Spring Breakers really became, and why I think a lot of people dislike Spring Breakers, this is kind of like a continuation of Spring Breakers in a way. It kind of reminded me a lot of it in terms of aesthetic, acting, story. But this kind of just handles it a bit better. I think because it's got to kind of deal with it a bit more maturely than Spring Breakers dealt with their storyline, because it wasn't real. This was real, so they really had to kind of respectfully but also entertainingly make this movie good. Number 16 is Bridget Jones's Baby. I know a lot of people didn't like it, a lot of people don't like Bridget Jones, but I may be Greek, but I'm also British, so I couldn't not watch it, and I really enjoyed it. I have to say, it was really funny. It just had me laughing so much in the cinema, so much. Renee, I'm not even going to bother trying to pronounce her last name. She gave a great performance as always, really. Colin Firth, again, just your typical British actor, nothing special but nothing to hate. That's all I really have to say about the movie. I don't have a lot to say. The reason it's on this list is because I really enjoyed it, and that's kind of it. It's very funny. I recommend it if you're a fan of both Bridget Jones and British comedy, because there is quite a difference in British comedy. It's quite sarcastic. But if you're not a fan of either of those, if you're not a fan of any of the actors in it, especially Colin Firth, I recommend you don't see it, because you're just not really going to have a very good time, because you're not going to like it. So number 15 is our first major blockbuster of the year making the list, and that is Deadpool. I think everyone really knew this one was going to appear on this list. It's appearing on a lot of people's lists. But one of my favourite YouTubers that I watch, Grace Randolph, actually made her top 10 list and an audience top 10 list. And in her top 10 list, she actually talked about how Deadpool had fallen from everyone's ratings, in a way, because even though it wasn't really a film people forgot, people were talking about it for a while. It's a film that was released at the beginning of the year, so we all kind of really liked it. Then the year went on, and we kind of forgot about the film in a way of adding it to our lists. It never really stuck there. And I didn't even realise that until watching her video yesterday and then looking at my list to make this video, and I was like, I actually see that. So that's why it's not ranked higher, because overall, it's not actually got a great rewatchability factor. The stuff with Deadpool is great, I love it. I even brought Deadpool on Blu-ray like the day it came out, because I loved the film so much. Which is why, when it got to his backstory, particularly when they're trying to mutate him, I was like, you know what, this really doesn't have the rewatchability factor I thought it would. Because it's kind of boring. Because you've seen what happens at the end, you're kind of a bit more like, come on, I just want to get to when he's Deadpool. That's the funny stuff. That's the good stuff. That's when all the fun action happens. For sure, there's nothing necessarily wrong with the scene where they're trying to make him a mutant. But what there is there's a lack of real entertainment to it. It's more kind of just a filler. That's what it feels like. It feels like they really had to make this backstory. I don't think they even did have to make a backstory, to be perfectly honest. I mean, Deadpool has like 50 different backstories. You know, he's known for his fourth wall breaking, so they could have made a joke about that, saying, oh, guess we didn't have the budget to make a full backstory first, right? But in the end, it's fine. That's all I can really say about it. That's why it's number 15. Now we're kind of moving on to the less than fine tier, the more than fine tier, we're now at the good tier. So first up is number 14, David Brent, Life on the Road. If you're a fan of The Office, UK or US, you probably know David Brent. You probably know Ricky Gervais. If you know that, you're gonna like this film. If you don't know that, you're probably gonna go into this film like, what the fuck am I watching? That's that. I like The Office. I really like Ricky Gervais. I think he's a fantastic comedian. I thought this film was fantastic. I thought it really had me laughing, and it had quite heartfelt moments too, which is kind of odd for a Ricky Gervais The Office film. But I guess Ricky Gervais is always one to surprise people, as we find out almost every year now at the Golden Globes. Number 13 is Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. So I've seen this film 3 times. The last time I saw it was the 5th of January. And I have to say, I was very conflicted on how I felt about Rogue One up until the 3rd viewing. Mainly because I just didn't really know how to process it. Because it's a lot to take in, really, on the first try. There's a lot to kind of... there's a lot of things presented to you that you have to take the time to let sink in. Particularly the ending. Don't worry, I'm not spoiling anything. There aren't going to be any spoilers whatsoever in this entire video for any of the movies. I might do a top 10 favourite movie endings of the year, because that might be quite fun to do. That will obviously have spoilers in it, or top 10 scenes. But for now, all I can really say about Rogue One is that without going into spoiler territory. And the reason it's not in the top 10 is because overall I found it a bit lacking. I wanted more. Not more Darth Vader. I'm not one of the people who marked the film down for not having enough Darth Vader. I honestly think that's kind of ridiculous to mark it down because a character who wasn't ever advertised as a main character wasn't in the film enough. But the reason it's not in the top 10 is just because overall, like I said, I left feeling a bit empty. Sure, it had its moments, it had a lot of its moments, but particularly the beginning, I really didn't like it. The first 45 minutes actually nearly sent me to sleep the first time I watched it. I thought it was very rushed, boring, and just didn't have that much to keep you interested. And now everyone's probably going to unsubscribe or dislike the video because I just bashed Rogue One for not being great, and number 12 is Absolutely Fabulous the movie. I know, Absolutely Fabulous the movie. Yeah, it's awful. It's honestly awful, and I love it for every bit of awfulness it gives you. I love Absolutely Fabulous. I just love seeing the characters of Patsy and Eddie going out and killing Kate Moss and on the run from police. It was entertaining. And I think when seeing it in the cinema particularly, 2016 has been a pretty crap year for a lot of people. That's why a lot of people were like, by 2016, on New Year's, they're like, yeah, fuck off, we're done with you now. So I think when everyone went to see this movie, everyone just kind of wanted, me included, to get away from all the crap going on in the world. And this movie offered it, and we all had a really good time. I was in a very packed theatre. I was probably the youngest person there, to be quite honest. But it was a blast. I really liked it. It's awful, but it's so bad it's good. I find myself laughing anytime I've watched it. I've watched this like 5 times now because it's a kind of, I've got nothing to do, might as well watch this film. Number 11 is Eye in the Sky. Eye in the Sky is a film I don't think really any of you will have heard of. I'm saying any of you as if I actually have subscribers. I have like 20 subscribers and barely any of them watch my videos, so. But a lot of people didn't hear about this film unless you're an actual film nerd or you follow film critics sometimes on YouTube, because it didn't do well at the box office. It made quite a dismal, really, amount of money at the box office. Not as bad as some films this year, but it definitely wasn't anything to be praised for. But the film itself was amazing. I really, really loved this movie. First of all, I think it was Alan Rickman's last ever role before he tragically passed away. Helen Mirren gave a fantastic performance well, not necessarily alongside Alan Rickman, but they worked off of each other really well. Even Aaron Paul gave quite a good performance. I really liked his character, even though he's not in the movie that much. And it's also a good movie in terms of diversity. It's a very diverse cast. It's not just white people. That's not something to necessarily be mad about in movies, though. Sometimes people just kind of forget, I guess, which is bad, sure, but it's just something that happens, I guess. But Eye in the Sky worked on its diversity quite well. It had a lot of different ethnicities being portrayed, different backgrounds, different colours, different genders, well, male and female. You know, there's a good range of people in this movie that can probably appeal to just about anyone who wants to watch a movie. And it's very intense. It's an incredibly intense, well-directed movie. It's got some great performances and overall quite a tragic ending. Although I will say, if you aren't someone who kind of really enjoys political movies or movies that try and really have a political discussion through their endings, through their morals, I don't think you'll enjoy this movie. It is, in a sense, kind of a propaganda piece on anti-missiles, anti-bombing, anti-war, you know, all that stuff. But I think it handles it quite tastefully, you know, it's still an enjoyable movie to watch. And now we're on to number 10. Oh, it's exciting, and number 10 is the film that I was waiting so long to see, Nocturnal Animals. It did make my top 10. I only made number 10, but it's still a really fantastic movie. I loved this movie. Although for some reason, the version I got of the movie, the version I rented, it didn't have the opening credits sequence in. It just came up with Fade to Black, and then the house, her going into her house. So it was a bit of an odd watch. I think they cut some stuff out. I don't know why, but they did. I might have got a different copy to a lot of people. I think that's probably what happened. Or something might have just mucked up with the thing. But overall, Nocturnal Animals was really enjoyable. It was quite intense. In fact, it was very intense at times. It's very well directed. It's a very beautiful movie to look at. And it's very well acted. Amy Adams is quite an underrated actor, I think. I think she has quite a fabulous... she has quite a good set of movies in her portfolio, this being one of them. But she's still not being really cast in any blockbusters. Obviously she was in Batman v Superman and Man of Steel. But she's not really been given the blockbuster treatment. She's not been given the opportunity to act in more high-profile films. I don't know if she wants to even. You know, she might be perfectly happy doing films like this, considering they're so amazing and she suits these films really well. Obviously, she was really good in Arrival. That was one of the only things I liked about Arrival. I really didn't like the movie, which is why it's not on this list. But overall, she gave a very enjoyable performance. So did Jake Gyllenhaal, one of my other favourite actors working today. And it's also a slightly sexy movie in a way. Not in like a sexual way. It just kind of feels quite seductive. There's a lot of quite strange elements to the movie, as you'll find out while you're watching it. I don't want to spoil anything, so that's all I'll say about that. Now, number 9, people might be a bit confused by, because it was officially released in 2015, but not in the UK until 2016. So I'm just putting that out there. That's why this did make my 2016 list, not a 2015 list. And number 9 is The Danish Girl. The Danish Girl was one of those movies that I didn't actually care about going in. I didn't really want to watch it in a sense. I just kind of got dragged along there. Because I'm gay, people just automatically think I'm going to like a film about a transgender person. And I guess I didn't really do that stereotype any justice, because I did really like this movie. I thought it was a very well crafted movie, a very well directed movie, a very visually pleasing movie. Aesthetic wise, it has a very kind of vivid, modern yet olden aesthetic vibe going for it, particularly in its sets. Obviously, it is based on a story, an olden story, but it feels modern, it feels new, which is important, I think, because a lot of LGBT movies, particularly right now, are quite depressing. This is a depressing movie. I'm not going to spoil it, but you pretty much know what's going to happen when you go into the movie, or if you know the story of this person, of this woman. But I think a lot of LGBT movies make more of a point of making the entire movie depressing. There's never really any uplifting moments in them, unless they're like the really sassy, cliched gays. So I thought this was a really interesting way to deal with it, because it had moments of comedy, it had moments of sadness, it had moments of just general uplifting vibes. Even the ending, as depressing and sad as it is, obviously if you know the true story, I will say spoiler alert here, because the character Lily Rabe, she eventually dies, because I think she has an infection after her transgender surgery to become a woman. But even after that happens, it's really beautifully captured in the way that her ex-wife, I can't remember her name, I think it was Gerda, I really don't know. I can't Google their names because I don't want to make this video any longer than it is. But she goes to this cliffside, which we see in the beginning of the movie, and one of Lily's scarves goes flying through the air, and it's just so beautifully captured as a way of, you kind of see it as her soul being let go and just drifting off, and I thought that was a really lovely way to handle it, because most movies, they would have had her die, everyone would be depressed at her funeral, you know, you'd have the umbrella with the rain, you know, people crying, putting flowers on the grave, and then it would end. And it's like, this is what happens when you are gay, or when you are transgender, or when you are, you know, they would have had you put on the flowers and be like, ending with, this is what happens when you are either of the, this is what happens when you're a member of the LGBT plus community. And it's like, thanks movie, way to change everyone's minds on how we're actually not that bad people, and how we're quite fun to be around, and we're not all special triggered people. But anyway, I spent a lot of time talking about that film. Number 8 is Suicide Squad. This is either going to make my video quite liked, quite disliked, or nobody's going to watch it anyway, but in general, Suicide Squad wasn't well received. I don't even like it that much as a movie, but in terms of enjoyability and how much I can actually enjoy the film, I fucking love this movie. I just find such enjoyment in it. I even found enjoyment in Batman vs Superman. In fact, I've even gone out and brought both of them on extended cuts on Blu-ray. That's how much I like these movies, because I do not buy a movie on Blu-ray unless I really like it, because there's no point in wasting my money on it, right? Particularly just for an extended cut. In Suicide Squad's case, the extended cut didn't really help. It did make it a bit more convoluted, of course, because you had that pretty awesome flashback with Harley Quinn and the Joker, with the motorcycle scene, but it's so randomly thrown in there. I really think the way they could have fixed Suicide Squad so easily, particularly at the beginning, to not include flashbacks randomly when we don't need them, is to just set them up without introducing them in prison first. You know, so it opens, we probably want to see Harley first, right? Or we'd see perhaps Amanda Waller going into the restaurant. I don't know how it would have been done, but we'd see each of their backstories and then they'd be in prison. We wouldn't see them in prison first, because that way we wouldn't have all these flashbacks, and that way there wouldn't be things for people to complain about. I didn't really mind the flashbacks because there weren't actually that many once the story got going. Although the story is quite convoluted and there's a lot of things that don't make sense. Particularly the scene that I still don't get, where Amanda is talking to Rick and she talks about his lady friend being in a drug-induced coma, and then Enchantress shows her June Moon dying, and he's like, what did you do? I just really don't get it. It's never explained. It's a convoluted movie. It's a very confusing movie, but it's entertaining. I enjoy it immensely, and that's why it's number 8 on this list. Number 7 is Woody Allen's film this year, Cafe Society. And this is what I was going to talk about earlier when I was talking about big name actors moving to indie films. Because in here, not Jesse Eisenberg, he's never really been a major blockbuster actor. He does have the Now You See Me movies, he did have Zombieland. But other than that, he tends to go for more low budget films. Or when I say low budget, I mean not hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, you know, just for special effects. No, I was talking about Kristen Stewart, because she's gone from Twilight, whether your opinion on that makes her a blockbuster champion or not is your choice, but for me, I actually enjoy the Twilight movies for what they are. They're not great, they're not even good, but I enjoy them, I have nostalgia towards them because I love the book. And seeing Kristen Stewart kind of take a break, she took quite a long break from acting. She obviously released a few films. She released Equals with Nicholas Hoult last year, but that was awful, and then created a feud with her and Jennifer Lawrence, allegedly. Even though apparently it's all false. But hey, it's Hollywood. But I think these are the roles that suit her more, because she does have, as hard as she can try, she does have quite a monotone voice. Kind of like me, really. And there's only so much people with a monotone voice can do to make them sound exciting. And it's down to, particularly in film, the way it's directed. And the way it's directed makes her seem just a lot more likeable than she is in a lot of her other films, particularly Snow White and the Huntsman. That is in my top worst films of the year, by the way. Huntsman Winter's War. No. I can't believe they actually invented that. And number 6 is honestly my biggest surprise of the year. Nerve was a big surprise, Sausage Party was a surprise, but oh my god, Ouija Origin of Evil. Talk about hidden talent. Like, a Ouija board, and it is Ouija. I will fight anybody in the comments who tries to disagree with me. I know my facts. It's Ouija. It's not Ouija. You do not pronounce yes and no in French. It going Ouija. It's Ouija. Anyway. A Ouija board is a scary concept on its own. Of course, because it's kind of you talking to the spirit world. You're kind of inviting demons in, which is what a lot of these movies go into. But Ouija, the first movie, ultimately failed with that because they kind of made it more of a teen soap drama, and they didn't really actually have a lot of horror elements to it until the end. What Ouija 2, Origin of Evil, actually manages to do is balance that, not perfectly, there are times when it runs a bit slow, but balances it in a way that it doesn't bug the movie down, it doesn't drag it down. It's well acted as well, particularly from the young child actress. She was amazing in this movie. She is one of the creepiest children I've ever seen in a movie. And I honestly mean that. She is really creepy. Like, really. Like, even just look at her face. She is bloody creepy in this movie. And that's a testament to her, really. It's not me belittling her. It's just me saying in general, she's a very well-rounded actress, I think. She's got a lot going for her. So number 5 is Kubo and the Two Strings. Kubo and the Two Strings is a stop animation movie by Laika. I never know how to pronounce the name. Studios. All their movies flop. This movie flopped. But all their movies pretty much are just amazing, which is a shame that they flop. Because Kubo and the Two Strings particularly is just it was the best animated film of the year. That's for sure. There's no denying that in my opinion. It just had such a craft to it and such a kind of beautiful aesthetic to it. You really felt like this was a major passion project. People were really passionate about this movie, and I think it definitely shows for the end product. And also it's just well acted. It's funny. It's great for kids. It's great for adults. It's got Matthew McConaughey in it, so automatically you should go and see the movie. And there's just not really anything not to like about this movie, I don't think. Obviously, that's my opinion. I know there are people who don't like it, but don't, even if you're not a fan of anime, which is quite different, or even you think, oh, it's a kids film, I don't want to watch it, which sounds stupid, especially to film critics and film nerds, kind of like someone wouldn't see a film just because it's a kids, but it happens. I had reservations about going into it because I didn't want to be a creepy teenager at a kids movie. But at the end of the day, I went in there and there were at least like 5 adults there, by themselves. There were barely any kids. There was one kid that talked through it, so I had to rent this again to watch it again. And it blew me away, it really did. It was a really well-made, fantastic movie, and I think it deserves a lot more praise than it's got, and I think it deserves to have made so much more money at the box office. Number 4 is War Dogs. War Dogs wasn't a surprise. I knew I was going to like it because I like The Hangover. I like Jonah Hill. I don't like Miles Teller that much, but I think he was perfectly likable in this movie. And I like the trailers. I really like business. Business in films is something I'm a sucker for. I'll always go and see a film about that. Particularly film industry business. That's why I'm quite excited for La La Land. I haven't seen it yet. It doesn't come out in the UK until January 12th. But I'm really excited because apparently it does deal with quite a lot about Hollywood. Even Sing, an animated movie called Sing, has dealt with it. So it's a running theme really starting to occur in Hollywood. People are starting to look for quite more intelligent movies because generations, even though we're all more technological now, there are actually quite intelligent, there is quite a level of intelligence now. You can't really get away often with stupidity, especially with the rise of the memes, right? You can't really do anything stupid without being made into a meme, particularly in big budget films. This wasn't a big budget film, but it was perfectly fine in the sense that it was enjoyable. It was funny. It was really funny. Jonah Hill had this laugh, which you probably heard anyone who's seen the film talk about, which was just so entertaining just to hear. Anytime you knew he was going to laugh, you just laughed before it even happened because it's just funny. It reminded me of Lil Wayne, how he raps. You might remember my amazing impression of Lil Wayne back in my Dangerous Woman album review when I didn't know what editing software was. Those were fun times. So that's number 4. Number 3 is a tie. I know that's technically cheating, I guess, but I just can't choose between these two films. And that is the UK film, because there is a US film like this, called Brotherhood. It is the final installment, allegedly, to Noel Clarke's Hood trilogy. You've got Kidulthood, Adulthood, and Brotherhood. And this movie was fantastic, and as was, ironically, the other movie tied in 3rd place, which is Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them was bound to make this list for me, even if I didn't enjoy it that much, because I just love Harry Potter. Harry Potter is something I grew up watching, I grew up reading. I just love Harry Potter. I love the Wizarding World, and luckily Fantastic Beasts took me back into that Wizarding World without making it all about trying to be more like Harry Potter again. It stood on its own as its separate story. I don't think critics seem to understand that this wasn't a Harry Potter movie, this was a Wizarding World movie. Kind of the way, I guess, with Assassin's Creed, not the movie, the game series. You have the main storylines with Desmond, and then you have like the some other animus subjects, like in Black Flag, where it's more it's a separate story. They're not really connected that much. There's things that connect them, subtly, but it's never done in a way that's really in your face. And I think critics didn't understand that, some of them anyway. Brotherhood, you don't need to have watched the other ones really, because it works so well as a movie. It kind of sets itself apart from the others in terms of directing. It's a lot more mature, and it's a lot funnier. There's this whole running gag with a club card, or a nectar card I think it was. It sounds so stupid, but it was so well done and so funny. and so well integrated into the intense themes that it provided some much needed relief. Because I think if it didn't have the comic relief in these movies, they would have been a bit too intense probably for audiences. So now, my top 2. So, my top 2 was originally my number 1, but it only changed about 3 weeks ago when I saw a movie at a special screening. So my number 2 is The Conjuring 2. The Conjuring 2 is directed by James Wan. It stars Vera Farmiga, Patrick Wilson, and really, really creepy old men in chairs and books and... Ugh. The Conjuring 2 is creepy. It is really well done. The camera work is fantastic, which is something I found lacking in a lot of movies this year. I don't think the editing and camera work on a lot of movies from the year was done very well. Particularly with Captain America Civil War. That is why it did not make this list at all. Spoiler alert, it's not number 1. It's in my top worst of the year. It was... I'm not going to get into it in this movie. I mean, in this video. But The Conjuring 2 managed, in my opinion, to surpass the original. The Conjuring 2, in my opinion, managed to surpass the original because there's just more scenes that really stuck with me. I think the only scenes that really stuck with me from the first were like 2, and one of them was the scene in which she's in the basement and the woman with bloody eyes is like, "Look what you made me do." In The Conjuring 2, so many scares stood out to me. But what stood out to me the most about The Conjuring 2 was the scene in which Lorraine and Ed have to go back into the house. The basement door closes and Lorraine is just kind of screaming for Ed. You know, she wants to be with him because she's seen that he's going to die. Like, that's what the demon wants. That's what it might happen. And it's just so powerful because you can really feel like her pain just in the way she's screaming for him. I just really loved the movie. It was fantastic. Speaking of fantastic, speaking of loving movies, I mean, oh my god. Number 1 is not just one of my favourite films of the year, but one of my favourite films of all time already, and that is A Monster Calls. I got the privilege and honour of seeing this at an advanced screening at Odeon. Hashtag screen unseen, I'll give them their promo. But it's just so fantastic. It's not been very hyped in terms of it's not got a lot of promotion going for it. It has some fantastic actors in it, and it's got Felicity Jones. This was my first introduction to Felicity Jones before seeing Star Wars, and after seeing this I was like, yeah, Star Wars is going to be fine. She's fantastic in this. She's not as good in Star Wars as she is in The Monster Calls, but also in The Monster Calls we have Sigourney Weaver, and any film with Sigourney Weaver in, I automatically love. I love her. Who doesn't love a bit of Alan Ripley, right? Particularly with Alien Covenant coming out this year. Please be good. Oh, but A Monster Calls was fantastically done. Liam Neeson as the monster was one of the most both intimidating and just emotionally... I don't know how to describe Liam Neeson in this movie, but it's a mix of menacing, loving, fantastic, and just the entire movie is downright amazing. Particularly visually. The visual effects in this movie are the best I have ever seen, and I mean ever, in any film I have ever seen. Including the blockbusters, including the non-blockbusters with big budgets, including fucking independent resurgence. Whatever it was, I don't even want to say its name. The only good thing that movie had about it was its special effects, and Jeff Goldblum. But Monster Calls, it's just got everything you really need. I have made a review of it. I don't think I'm gonna upload it though, because while editing the review, I didn't really find it to be a movie that needed to be reviewed, more one that I can just talk about in a list right now. But there is a lot to delve into with the movie, so there might be a video about that, because I think there's a lot to be said about this movie and movies aimed at children, movies aimed at certain age ranges. But that's my list for 2016. I know this was quite a long video. If you actually made it through the list, good for you. I don't know why, but thanks. And do you agree with me? Do you disagree? I'm sure a lot of you disagree with number 8. And probably number 12. But, I don't know. I thought 2016 was a fairly decent year for film. Although, apart from A Monster Calls, Conjuring, Nocturnal Animals, I don't think any of the films from this year are really going to stick with me for in a few years' time, right? I think a lot of them are quite forgettable. They're great for now, but in the long run, I don't see myself coming back to pretty much half of my entire Letterboxd list. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.